This happened a few years back when I was about 17. I just finished my shift at a local retail store in the UK around 7 p.m. It was winter, so the sky was already pitch black. I started my usual 15-minute walk home, a route I'd taken countless times. On the way, I passed a gym just a few minutes from my house. The area wasn't exactly posh, kind of rough around the edges, but nothing too dodgy. I'd walked by that gym 1,000 times without issue. As I approached the building, I heard voices. They grew louder as I got closer, but when I turned left onto the dark cycle path, a narrow, paved trail often used by cyclists and pedestrians, the voices stopped abruptly. I figured they must have heard my footsteps crunching on the gravel. That sudden silence put me on edge right away. People sometimes stop talking when someone passes by, so I tried to brush it off and kept walking. Through the darkness, I could just make out a couple of figures sitting on an abandoned stairway leading to a boarded-up door. I carried on, trying to act normal. The figures stayed silent as I passed, which only heightened my social paranoia, already amplified by the natural fear of walking alone in the dark. As soon as I moved past them, I heard footsteps descending the stairwell behind me. I resisted the urge to look back, not wanting to seem weird or paranoid. It could just be a coincidence, right? Maybe they were just heading the same way. But the footsteps continued, steady and deliberate, getting closer and closer. My heart raced, but I kept my eyes forward, telling myself it was nothing. Finally, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I forced myself to turn around, and in that split second, I saw an outstretched arm and a grasping hand just inches from me. I bolted, sprinting as fast as I could while glancing back. The guy shouted, "Come here, you little *T." His voice was rough, aggressive. I caught a glimpse of him, an older bloke, maybe around 40, out of shape, huffing as he tried to keep up. Behind him, I noticed another figure taller and slimmer, but he was some distance back and didn't even try to run. Being a fit 17-year-old, I quickly outpaced the older guy. Adrenaline surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. As I turned off the cycle path toward my house, the man yelled something crude again, but he stopped chasing me almost immediately. I made it home safely, heart still pounding, and locked the door behind me. The next day, I picked up the local newspaper and felt a chill. There had been several attacks in that same area, including one on an elderly woman. The reports described assailants putting victims in headlocks before mugging them. Reading that, it hit me hard, the first time I truly realized there are people out there who prey on others, targeting hardworking folks just trying to get by. Looking back, I learned a hard lesson. If you ever feel like someone's following you, don't wait. Run. Even if it's just a twinge of paranoia, start running. Worst case, you might look a bit odd to a stranger, but that's nothing compared to what could happen. I'll never know why the taller guy didn't join his mate in chasing me. Maybe his heart wasn't in it, or maybe he was fitter and could have caught me if he tried. They could have worked together and got me easily. But I got lucky, and I'm grateful for it. To give you some context, I'm an avid mountain walker and have been trekking the hills and mountains of South Wales for over 15 years. In all that time, I've only felt genuinely concerned for my safety twice. Once when I was confronted by a bull, and the other is this story. It was a scorching hot Saturday afternoon about 5 years ago, and I was out on one of my favorite walks, a 14-mile loop through a forested area with gravel tracks. For my American readers, South Wales is a region in the UK known for its rugged landscapes, with trails winding through dense woods and steep valleys, much like parts of Appalachia, but with a distinctly British vibe. Think narrow paths, ancient trees, and the occasional sheep wandering about. The first 8 or 9 miles of the walk were uneventful, just the usual crunch of gravel underfoot and the hum of a quiet forest. It was so hot that day that I barely saw anyone else, maybe a couple of cyclists, but no other walkers, which wasn't unusual for such a sweltering afternoon. I was at the bottom of a track that would lead me up to the top of the valley when I noticed a man about 50 meters ahead, walking in the same direction. He was tall, thin, with short cropped hair, wearing a white t-shirt, blue jeans, and black boots. What caught my eye was his strange limp, like he had to swing one leg around, almost as if it was shorter than the other or stiff in some way. I didn't think much of it. He was moving pretty fast despite the limp, so I figured I wouldn't need to overtake him. The sun was blazing overhead, making the air feel thick and heavy. I kept my pace steady, following the gravel track as it started to climb. The man ahead kept limping along, making quick work of the incline despite his odd gait. The path began to bend, and I lost sight of him as the trees thickened around the curve. The track soon split into two paths, one heading east toward a small, rarely used car park, and the other west, leading to the valley's summit. Just as I was about to head west, I heard a man shout a curse word, something sharp and angry, like, "Damn it," coming from within the forest. I froze for a second, then heard another outburst, this one more pain than angry. My first thought was that the limping guy must have tried taking a shortcut through the woods and tripped or hurt himself. Concerned, I pushed through the thick trees and ferns, moving quickly to see if he needed help. But then I stopped dead in my tracks. Up ahead, through the dense foliage, I saw him. He was sitting on a fallen log, head buried in his hands. Suddenly, he screamed a raw, agonized sound that echoed through the trees. Then he bolted upright and started punching a tree, his face flushed bright red with rage. He grabbed a stick and began smashing it against the trunk, shouting, "I hate you," over and over, stomping his feet like he was trying to crush something into the ground. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I was seeing. This guy looked completely unhinged, like he'd lost all control. My heart pounded, and a cold sweat prickled my skin despite the heat. I thought to myself, I need to get out of here before he sees me. Quietly, I started backing away toward the main track, careful not to step on any twigs or make noise. This man was clearly not right in the head, and I didn't want to be anywhere near him. Once I reached the gravel path, I decided to take the east track toward the car park, figuring it was the best way to avoid him. It was less traveled, and I knew a shortcut north through the ferns that would get me back on course. As I walked, I started to feel more confident, even chuckling to myself. Maybe he was just letting off steam, I thought. A forest in the middle of nowhere seems like a decent place to vent, right? The ferns grew thicker, reaching chest height, but they were easy enough to push through. I was starting to relax, thinking I dodged a bullet. Then I glanced back. About 25 meters behind me, I saw him, the limping man, wading through the ferns, coming straight toward me. His head bobbed up and down between the green fronds, and he had this strange, twisted snarl on his face. My stomach dropped. There was no way this was a coincidence. He must have seen me back at the tree and followed me. No other explanation made sense. I was only about a mile from a main road, so I picked up my pace, pushing through the ferns faster, my heart racing again. Every so often, I looked back, and each time I saw I was pulling further ahead. He was limping, after all, and I was moving quickly. Slowly, I started to relax, thinking I'd lost him. I made it to the main road without seeing him again, and the whole thing left me shaken. I still don't know what to make of it. The fact that he followed me through the ferns was the most disturbing part, like he'd locked onto me for some reason I couldn't fathom. I've done that same walk over a dozen times since then, and I've never seen him again. But every time I pass that spot in the forest, I can't help but feel a little uneasy, wondering what was going through his head that day. This all happened about 3 years ago when I started working at a small financial institution for my college co-op program. For context, a co-op in the US is like a work placement tied to your major, where you gain real-world experience while earning academic credit. I needed 2 semesters of relevant work for my degree, and this tiny organization, just 4 employees including me, fit the bill. My boss, technically the CEO, ran the show. The problem with places this small is that there's often no real oversight, no HR department to keep things professional. Things could get messy fast. From the start, my boss gave off weird vibes. He was the kind of guy who'd brush his hand across your lower back as he walked by, or rest his hands on your shoulders when he leaned over to check your work on the computer. I'm not big on that level of touchiness, especially at work, but with no HR to report to, I just gritted my teeth and dealt with it. He was married with 5 kids, 2 biological sons and 3 adopted daughters, but that didn't stop him from constantly complaining about his wife. He'd flirt shamelessly with every woman who came into his office for a meeting, all smiles and charm, like it was second nature. At first, I tried to shrug it off as him just being overly friendly, but his behavior got weirder over time. He started buying me breakfast, unprompted bagels or coffee left on my desk with a note like, "Thought you'd need this." He'd give me tickets to local sporting events like baseball or basketball games, which felt odd since I hadn't asked for them. Then he started asking me to look up random people's Facebook profiles, ones he said he couldn't see anymore. I didn't know what that meant, but it creeped me out. He'd also liked every single one of my Facebook posts, even old ones from years back, and I'd catch him commenting on my photos with stuff like, "Looking great." It was unsettling, to say the least. Things took a turn when he started sending me to the file room to organize paperwork instead of letting me work with my colleague on actual financial tasks. I'd be in there, sorting through dusty folders, and sometimes I'd catch him staring at me from the doorway. As soon as I'd look up, he'd dart back to his office like nothing happened. It made my skin crawl, but I didn't know how to address it without making things awkward. I was just a college kid trying to get through my co-op after all. One day, things got really bad. I wasn't wearing makeup that day. Maybe I was just tired or didn't have time, and he came up close, way too close, while I was working. He smirked and said, "Rough night, huh? You look tired. Did you have some fun?" I froze, not sure how to respond. Then he chuckled and added, "I remember those kinds of nights when I was your age. Always go unprotected, it feels the best, and the adrenaline rush is worth it." I felt my stomach churn. His words were so inappropriate, so disgusting, that I wanted to disappear. I was scared, humiliated, and just stuck there, unable to say anything back. That night, I told my dad everything. He was livid, angrier than I'd ever seen him. The next day, he stormed into the office and chewed out my boss in front of everyone. I was mortified, standing there red-faced as my dad laid into him, but deep down, I was so grateful. His protectiveness was my saving grace. My boss didn't say much, just stood there looking pale and muttering some weak excuses. Things were tense after that, and I kept my head down, counting the days until my co-op ended. Shortly before the semester wrapped up, my boss told my professor he wasn't going to hire me full-time because I didn't work hard enough. I was gutted to lose a well-paying job, but honestly, I was relieved to get away from him. He ended up hiring a close friend of his to replace me, which stung but felt predictable. A few months later, I had to go back to the office to close out my account. When I got there, I noticed something strange. One of the board members had taken over my boss's office. His desk was gone, and the board member's belongings were everywhere. Files, photos, even a coffee mug. Confused, I asked a coworker what was going on. She looked nervous and said she couldn't talk about it there, but promised to call me later. That night, she called and dropped a bombshell. My boss had been arrested for sexual assault. Apparently, his wife had walked in on him in the act and later found multiple videos of various incidents. I felt sick just hearing it. One of the company's biggest stakeholders, a board member, had taken over as CEO, and my coworker said he was a million times better, professional, respectful, the complete opposite. My boss was eventually sentenced and sent to a U.S. penitentiary in February of the following year, where he's locked up until 2038. I felt a wave of relief knowing justice was served, but also a lingering dread. It could have been me. I can sleep easier now, knowing I'll never see him again, but the what-ifs still haunt me sometimes. I got a much better job not long after, and I've moved on, but that experience left a mark, a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong when someone in power thinks they can get away with anything. In June of last year, I moved to a borough in South London to pursue a master's degree in the city. For my American readers, a borough is like a distinct neighborhood or district within a city, each with its own vibe and character. I chose this area because my boyfriend worked there, making it convenient for him, and it was cheaper than living in central London. The neighborhood wasn't the worst, but it wasn't great either. Picture a place where you walk past a pub at 9:30 a.m. on your way to class and see people already drunk, still there when you return at 5 p.m. It's the kind of area where you might spot rough-looking folks with their Staffordshire Terriers, catcalling through crooked teeth. There were plenty of nice, normal people too, but living right on the high street, The main road lined with shops and bustle meant I ran into some odd characters. I was 23 at the time, blonde, with an hourglass figure, so I was used to getting attention from random guys on the street. Usually, it was just a quick comment or a whistle, annoying but harmless, and I'd ignore it. But this one guy was different. The first time I encountered him, I was walking home from school in the summer, wearing a kimono cover-up, a light, flowy garment often worn over swimsuits or outfits. I had my headphones in, listening to music, when I noticed a man matching my pace. He was about 5 feet 10 inches, slim, black, with a cropped afro, wearing big 80s style reading glasses and a matching camouflage shirt and pants set. He looked to be in his 20s. He motioned for me to take out my headphones, and I did, caught off guard. "Hey, I like your robe or whatever you call it," he said, grinning. "It's a kimono," I replied politely but curtly, hoping to keep it short. "Where'd you get it?" he asked, still walking in step with me. "I don't remember," I said, trying to brush him off, confused why we were discussing fashion. "Okay. Well, you're a classy girl. Can I get your number?" "Do you like clubbing?" "Sorry, I have a boyfriend," I said firmly. He ignored that completely. "I have a cousin who owns this club. We could go there together sometime if you want." "No, sorry, I have a boyfriend," I repeated, quickening my pace. "I bet you're just saying that to get rid of me," he said with a smirk, still keeping up. I forced a tight smile and kept walking, checking over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't following me home. He didn't, but I saw him corner another girl just moments later. What a creep, I thought, moving on with my day. About a week later, I was heading to the grocery store when I saw a shadow in my peripheral vision. It was him again, motioning for me to take out my headphones. I did, thinking he might have forgotten our last encounter. "I like your sunglasses." "What brand are they?" he asked. I laughed internally, realizing this must be his go-to line, complimenting something I was wearing. "Thanks," I said, keeping it short. "So, do you like clubbing? I met you last week, and I still have a boyfriend," I said, hoping he'd get the hint. "We met last week?" he asked, sounding incredulous. "Yes, right outside Nando's," I said, referring to a popular UK chicken restaurant chain, similar to a fast casual spot like Chipotle in the US. "I don't think so. I'd have remembered a fine girl like you," he replied, smirking again. "Right? Well, sorry, I have to go." "Where are you from?" he asked, picking up on my North American accent, which stood out in this part of London. "I'm Canadian," I said, figuring it might jog his memory since I was likely the only North American around. "I like Canadian girls," he said, making me cringe. "Okay, I have to go," I said, walking away. He stopped following me, heading off in another direction. 2 weeks passed, and I told my boyfriend about this guy. He was mildly annoyed, but figured the guy would give up after being rejected twice in a week. One night, we were walking home from central London, coming from the train station, when I spotted him ahead, wearing the same camo outfit. He was following another girl, giving her the same "my cousin owns a nightclub" spiel. I pointed him out to my boyfriend, and we shared a laugh at how pathetic it was. The girl ignored him, staring at her phone, and he eventually lost interest and walked away. A couple of weeks later, I was heading to the post office to mail a package when I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was him, now wearing a blue bomber jacket with a phoenix embroidered on it. I was instantly annoyed, not just because he was back, but because he'd touched me. "Slow down," he said, laughing. "Listen, we've met before." "I have a boyfriend," I said, clutching my package tightly. "I would have remembered you," he said, acting like this was our first meeting. I wasn't sure if he was joking or genuinely had no memory of me. "I don't claim to be unforgettable, but we've spoken twice. You keep asking me about clubbing. So what, you like clubbing?" he said, grinning. "Let me guess, you have a cousin who owns a nightclub?" "Yeah, how'd you know?" he asked, as if it was news to him. "Because we've spoken before." "Look, I have a boyfriend, and I don't want you to follow me again. When you see me, don't approach me, because I'm always going to say no." He didn't respond, just kept walking in step with me as I headed to the post office. I glared at him, hoping he'd remember my face this time. As I turned to go inside, he grabbed my hand. I spun around, and he gave me this predatory, leering stare that sent chills down my spine. "Do you have any single friends for me, then?" he asked. I was rattled, both by his energy and the fact that he'd touched me again. "No," I said firmly, pulling my hand away and heading inside. He lingered at the doorway for a moment before walking off. I told my boyfriend, who was furious. He offered to confront the guy, saying he often saw him on his way to work, always harassing some other girl. It seemed like this guy had nothing better to do than hit on random women all day. Over the next few months, he approached me a few more times, always with the same nightclub pitch, claiming he didn't remember me and commenting on my accent. I stopped responding, and he'd eventually give up and walk away, sometimes crossing the street to bother another girl right after striking out with me. I started wondering if he was high, mentally ill, or both. His inability to remember me felt like a tactic, but I couldn't be sure. It got to the point where I dreaded walking down the street, afraid of running into him. He hadn't been violent, but his unpredictable energy and occasional touching, like blocking my path, felt threatening. I called the police, who took a statement but said there wasn't much they could do without a name, photo, or phone number to identify him. One officer suggested I pretend to be interested to get his number, which felt wildly uncomfortable, so I refused. That same day, I was walking home from the grocery store with heavy bags, turning onto my street, a slight downward slope, when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned, and it was him. "No," I shouted, not wanting him to know where I lived. "Don't come near me. I'm not interested in talking to you." "No, stay away," he shouted back, lingering at the top of the slope. I froze, not wanting to keep walking and reveal my address. Eventually, he spotted another girl and followed her instead, disappearing from sight. This went on for months. Sometimes I'd ignore him, sometimes I'd tell him to leave me alone, but he always claimed not to remember me. Then came a more disturbing incident. I was heading to the gym and nearly bumped into him around a corner. At first, I didn't realize it was him, but when I looked up, I saw his face. He must have taken my glance as interest because he started following me. I walked faster, checking behind me, and he wasn't there. Relieved, I thought he had better things to do that morning. After about 10 minutes, I relaxed, walking at a normal pace. Then I heard fast footsteps behind me. I turned, and he was sprinting toward me, either having followed me discreetly or guessing my route to catch up. "Go to the gym," he shouted, eyeing my workout clothes. "You don't need to work on that body. It looks gorgeous to me." I broke into a sprint, heart pounding, trying to get away. He was faster than I expected, catching up and putting his arm out to block me. Furious, I stopped and looked him in the eyes. "Listen, if you bother me again, I'm calling the police." "The police? I don't even know you." "Bothered you?" he said, acting confused. I couldn't reason with him. "Remember my face this time and leave me alone," I said, storming off. He didn't follow me to the gym. I called the police again, but they said there wasn't much they could do since he hadn't assaulted me. They acknowledged his behavior was unacceptable, but suggested I try to get an identifying photo next time. Weeks policing services and supplies limited weeks went by without an encounter, and I started to hope he'd gotten the message. But on a cold March day, I was walking to the train station about 15 minutes from my house, and there he was lingering on the stairs leading up to it. His eyes looked wild, scanning for someone, anyone. He spotted me and sprang into action. "Nice day, isn't it?" he said, his tone rehearsed. It was cold and gray, not a nice day at all. I ignored him, pulling out my Oyster card, a prepaid card used for London's public transport, like a Metro card in New York, and hurried toward the turnstiles, assuming he wouldn't have a ticket to follow me. "Nice day, isn't it?" he repeated louder. "No," I cut him off, shaking with anger. "Listen, I've met you a million times. I've told you I'm not interested. What is wrong with you?" "That's rude, isn't it? I've never spoken to you in my life," he said without missing a beat. I couldn't believe his audacity. I called the police again, hoping the station's surveillance cameras might have caught him. But they called back days later, saying there were no outside cameras at the entrance. My boyfriend, who was getting angrier with every encounter, saw him at a corner store one morning trying to buy pens. The shop owner said he often stole merchandise, like eating chocolate bars at the till and promising to pay later, but the process of reporting petty theft was too complicated to bother. The most recent encounter was about a month ago. I was walking home from the station when he started walking in step with me again. This time, I decided to stay calm and play along just enough to get information. "My cousin and I are looking for members. Do you want to join?" he said. "No thanks, I don't really have any musical talent," I replied, subtly raising my phone to snap a clear picture of his face. "Okay, do you like clubbing?" he asked. I ignored him. "So, what's your name?" "Marlon," he said. "What's yours, gorgeous?" I gave him a fake name, noting his Marlon like Brando. I finally had a photo and a name. The police are reviewing it, but I'm not holding my breath given their track record. He hasn't bothered me since, but I'm still on edge. I plan to move eventually, but for now, I'm stuck wondering if he truly doesn't remember me or if it's just a lame tactic. Those predatory eyes at the post office still haunt me, and I'm determined to make sure he stays away. I'm a 19-year-old woman, and at the time of this story, I was living in the roughest part of downtown Portland, Oregon, right behind the projects, a term often used in the U.S. to describe low-income public housing areas typically associated with high crime. I knew I shouldn't have been riding the bus late at night, but sometimes life doesn't give you much choice. It was a Friday night in April, and my boyfriend was hosting his birthday celebration with a big group of friends. I work weekends Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, so I was a bit annoyed about the timing, but it was the most convenient for everyone else, so I went along with it. Since I had an early shift the next morning, I had to head home early, which meant taking the bus alone well past 11 p.m. The bus ride was about 40 minutes, winding through the city's dimly lit streets. I'd taken it at odd hours before and always felt relatively safe, but that night something felt off. As I started my journey home, a heavy, foreboding feeling settled in my chest, like a warning I couldn't shake. I gripped the pocket knife I always carried for protection, its weight a small comfort in my jacket pocket, and stayed hyper-aware of my surroundings. About halfway through the ride, I decided to text my roommate to see if he could meet me at my stop downtown. He worked late shifts nearby, and I hoped he'd be free. Lucky for me, he replied that he'd been let off early and was already heading back to wait at my bus stop. That decision to text him might have saved me from something much worse. The ride itself started out normal. Same old hum the bus, same flickering overhead lights, same mix of tired passengers staring out windows or at their phones. But that uneasy feeling never left me. I kept scanning the bus, noting every face, every movement. One stop before mine, just 2 blocks from my destination, heavy-set guy with bright green hair and a pit bull on a leash got on. He didn't seem to notice me, or at least I didn't catch him looking, so I tried to focus on my phone and mind my own business. His dog sat quietly by his feet, and he slouched into a seat near the back. Nothing about him screamed trouble at first, just another late-night rider in a city full of characters. When my stop came, I got off and spotted my roommate waiting for me under a streetlight, his familiar figure a relief against the dark. We started walking home, sticking to the wide sidewalk along a row of rundown office buildings. That's when things got creepy. I noticed the green-haired guy had gotten off at my stop too. He was trailing behind us, his pit bull trotting along, and he was walking way too close for comfort. My roommate picked up on it immediately, and we both fell silent, quickening our pace. The sidewalk was broad, and we were hugging the edge, so it was painfully obvious he was trying to close the gap between us. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate, and I could hear the jangle of his dog's leash getting nearer. My roommate and I exchanged a glance, both of us tense. We kept walking fast, trying to outpace him without making it obvious we were spooked. As we turned a sharp corner onto our street, I couldn't resist looking back. The guy had stopped right where we turned, and in the dead of night, with nothing but those crusty office buildings around, he was pointing his phone at me, the flash glaring as he snapped pictures. My heart sank. There was nothing worth photographing out here. No landmarks, no scenery, just a dark sidewalk and us. I shot him a glare, hoping to convey, "What the hell are you doing?" But the sight of that flash in the darkness sent a chill through me. We hurried home, my roommate staying close, and locked the door behind us. My hands were shaking as I set down my bag, The image of that camera flash burned into my mind. I kept thinking about how much worse it could have been if I hadn't texted my roommate, if I'd been walking alone like I usually did. That gut instinct, that nagging feeling I'd had all night, had pushed me to reach out, and I'm still so grateful I listened to it. Whatever that guy's intentions were, his actions, following me, taking pictures in the middle of the night, felt wrong, predatory. I don't know what might have happened if I'd been alone, and I don't want to think about it too much. All I know is I got lucky, and I'm not taking the late night bus alone again if I can help it. To set the stage, I need to give you some background on where my head was at during this time and why I let this situation drag on as long as it did. I'm a 20-year-old guy now, but this story started when I was 14, freshman in high school in a U.S. city. For my American readers, high school here typically spans grades 9 through 12, ages 14 to 18, and freshman year is your first, often overwhelming, step into that world. My middle school years were rough. Relentless bullying left me with severe depression, crippling social anxiety, and self-esteem so low it might as well have been negative. I had no friends outside of school, and I couldn't go a single day without someone mocking or targeting me. I didn't know how to stand up for myself or set boundaries. I felt like I deserved the treatment. I'd bend over backwards to please anyone, desperate for a shred of positive attention, even if it came from someone who wasn't genuine. Those struggles still linger sometimes, though nowhere near as bad now. After middle school, I moved to a different part of the city, hoping for a fresh start. I wanted my freshman year to bring the happiness I'd been craving, but it didn't. The bullying continued, and making friends was still a struggle. I was so desperate for connection that I didn't care who I hung out with. I just wanted someone, anyone, to accept me. That mindset is what led to this whole mess. The bullying was worst in gym class, where I got picked on by multiple kids with no reprieve. Eventually, I found a small group of people in that class who seemed to like me. They were chill, and while we didn't hang out much outside school, I enjoyed talking to them during class. It felt like a lifeline. Halfway through freshman year, a few new students joined our gym class. One of them, who I'll call M for this story, quickly got friendly with my group, which is how I met him. From the moment I laid eyes on M, he gave off a seriously creepy vibe, something about his intense stare and overly familiar demeanor. But I ignored it, too desperate for a friend to listen to my gut. We bonded over being outcasts, both constantly bullied with no real friends to speak of. We swapped numbers, and our friendship began. I was so grateful to have someone I could be myself around without fear of ridicule. Looking back, I want to kick myself for overlooking that creepy vibe, because it wasn't long before I found out why it was there. For about 2 months, things were fine. Then one day, during a conversation in gym class, M opened up about something personal. I don't recall exactly how it came up, but he confessed he thought he might be bisexual, feeling attracted to both girls and boys. He was worried about being bullied for it. I told him there was nothing wrong with that and that he should be true to himself. If people gave him grief, they weren't worth his time. He seemed relieved, saying I was his best friend at school. There was a brief silence, then he asked, So, do you have feelings for guys too? No, I've only ever been attracted to girls, I said honestly. He looked visibly disappointed, his face falling for a moment before he said, Oh, okay, just wondering. We moved on to other topics, and the rest of the class went as usual. I want to be clear, I have no issue with anyone's sexual orientation. It's their business, and I'm not judgmental. But I knew right then that he was hinting at feelings for me, and unlike other times when guys had hit on me, this felt unsettling, like a line had been crossed. About 2 weeks later, the stalking started. I lived about a 15 to 20 minute walk from school, an apartment right next to a train station. M's last class was a few classrooms away from mine, and we'd often bump into each other leaving the building. He usually took a bus home from a stop right outside school, but one day he said he was switching to the train and asked if I'd walk with him since I lived nearby. I found it odd that he'd suddenly changed his route with no explanation, but I was happy to have company. We walked to the station and parted ways. I went into my apartment, tossed my bag in my room, and headed to the living room to watch TV. Glancing out the window, I saw him standing at the top of the station stairs, staring up at my apartment with the creepiest smile I'd ever seen. My stomach twisted, and I felt a wave of discomfort. I ducked down on the couch, waited a few minutes, and checked again. Thankfully, he was gone. The next day, I confronted him in gym class. "Why were you staring at my house and smiling like that?" I asked. He looked confused, then laughed. "What? I wasn't staring at your house. You're crazy for thinking I'd do that." His denial threw me off, and I let him gaslight me into dropping it. But after that, he started popping up everywhere at school. I'd see him between classes, lingering in hallways, and he'd walk me to my next class, even if it made him late for his own. One day, I didn't run into him after school, but as I got close to home, he texted, asking where I was and saying he was waiting for me outside school. I told him I'd already walked home, and he replied that he was upset I hadn't waited for him. I felt guilty, like I'd been a bad friend, and apologized. The next day, he was waiting right outside my classroom door when I left, something he started doing whenever he could get out early. He also began liking and commenting on every single one of my Facebook posts and photos, even old ones. When he asked why I didn't respond to his comments, and I said I didn't have time to reply to everything, he got annoyed. One day, while I was grabbing milk at a nearby store, he followed me inside. He said he'd seen me from the train station platform and wanted to say hi. Another time, as we walked to the station, he asked if he could come hang out at my place. I was having a rough day with my depression and just wanted to be alone until my dad and sister got home. I made an excuse, saying I had to leave soon anyway, and suggested another time. He got angry, stormed off, and didn't contact me all weekend. By Monday, he acted like nothing had happened. His conversation started getting creepier. Once he said he wished he could see the sexy body I had under my clothes, laughing like it was a joke. I laughed awkwardly, hoping it was. But he kept making sexual comments, not just about me, but about other people we knew. The worst was when he slapped but as I was leaving for my next class. When I demanded to know what the hell he was doing, he grinned and said, "It's just for fun, dude. We're friends. You can do it to me too if you want." I walked away, feeling disgusted and violated. When freshman year ended, M vanished. No text, no Facebook activity, nothing. I was relieved, thinking it was over. But on the first day of sophomore year, I walked into my math class and saw him. He was thrilled to see me, and weirdly, I was too, though I'm not sure why. I didn't ask why he'd gone silent all summer. Things were okay for about a month. His creepy behavior seemed to dial back, but then it ramped up again. He never did his math homework and kept asking to copy mine. I let him at first, thinking it was no big deal, but it became a habit. When I told him I was tired of it and he needed to do his own work, he claimed he was too dumb and would fail without my help. I said I didn't want him to fail, but he had to learn on his own. He accused me of not caring about him, asking how I could let him fail. I held firm, and he didn't push further that day. His texts became erratic. Sometimes he'd just say, "Hey, what's up?" and we'd have a normal chat. Other times he'd text that I looked like crap and should care more about my appearance. Once he asked why I was ignoring him, saying he deserved a response. The worst was when he texted that he didn't understand why I wouldn't let him come with me to pick up my sister from school, calling me a creep in a way that implied something sick. I told him he was twisted for thinking that and stopped responding. Around this time, I made a new friend in my history class, a girl who became my best friend. I started hanging out with her and her group often, and it felt good to have positive friendships. I mentioned him to them, and they warned me he was bad news, saying they didn't understand why I hung out with him. They were right. His manipulative behavior and creepiness were becoming clearer. I started cutting contact slowly at first. When I got a new phone with a new number, I didn't give it to him. That worked for about a month until he somehow got my new number and texted me while I was walking to pick up my sister. It was something like, "So you find new friends and ditch your old ones? You're such a jerk. I've been there for you since day one, and you couldn't even tell me you changed your number. I thought you were different, but you're just like everyone else at this school." I was done being nice. I texted back, saying he creeped me out, that I was tired of him making me feel bad about myself, and that his constant hitting on me and sexual remarks were out of line when he knew I wasn't interested. I told him I knew he was stalking me and to leave me alone. He didn't reply. I blocked his number that day and avoided him at school. He didn't speak to me, and I rarely saw him outside math class. I hoped that was the end, but it wasn't. One Sunday at 1 a.m., I was in my room playing Left 4 Dead with friends online, the only one awake in the house. I got a text from an unknown number. "I'm here." Thinking it was a mistake, I replied that they had the wrong number. Then the number called me. I answered, "Hello, I don't have the wrong number." "Get outside. I want to talk to you." "I'm across the street." It was him. I was livid. "What? You're at my house?" "Dude, go away." "I told you to leave me alone," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Listen, I just want to talk. We can be best friends again," he pleaded. "I'm calling the cops," I said, picking up the landline and starting to dial 911. He sounded panicked, begging me not to, then shouted, Okay, I'm leaving," and hung up. I heard footsteps running outside and assumed it was him fleeing. I broke down and told my parents everything. They were horrified and told me to report him to the dean on Monday, promising to help me handle it. I reported him to the dean, and we had a hearing the next day. He was ordered to stay away from me at school and never contact me again. He broke down crying during the meeting, but I didn't care. He was moved to the other side of the room in math class, and we never had another class together after sophomore year. I avoided him for the rest of high school, only seeing him once more near the end of senior year at the mall food court. I was meeting friends when he walked by with a group of girls and said, "Oh, hi," like we were still buddies. I shot him a dirty look and kept walking. I still blame myself for everything that happened. I should have trusted my gut when it screamed that he was bad news. I was so desperate for a friend that I let him walk all over me, and I was too scared of being judged to tell anyone sooner. I know I made mistakes, but I'm not that person anymore. I haven't seen or spoken to him in over 3 years, and I hope that number keeps growing for both our sakes. This story took place in June 2017. I live in a fairly large city bordering one of the Great Lakes in the U.S., just a few blocks inland from the water's edge. For my American readers, the Great Lakes are a group of 5 massive freshwater lakes in the northern U.S., and living near one often means scenic views and a mix of urban and natural vibes. I share a cozy 1-bedroom apartment with my girlfriend of 5 years, Julia, and our 2 goofy cats. We both work full-time. She makes chocolate at a local shop, and at the time, I was a delivery driver after recently losing a higher-paying job as a writer in a suburban town. It was my first real job out of college, and the loss hit hard. We don't earn much, but we get by spending our free time playing video games together, making snacks, and enjoying the occasional night out for drinks, dinner, or a movie. Our apartment has a small window with a view of the city's skyline, which makes our little space feel like home. About 2 weeks before this incident, I'd start a habit of driving to a spot by the lake to clear my head. It was just a circular parking lot, nothing fancy, but it was close enough to the water to see the waves glinting under the sun. It was a tranquil place to sit in my car, reflect, and job hunt. That day, I'd gone there to watch the James Comey hearings on my phone, a major political event at the time, widely covered on U.S. news, while occasionally switching to the Indeed app to send out resumes. After about an hour, I decided it was time to head home. As I backed out of the parking lot, I felt a sudden, gut-level urge to look behind me. When I did, I saw a light blue, late-model Hyundai pull in. The driver was staring at me intensely, his eyes locked on mine through his open window. I looked away, assuming it was just an awkward moment, the kind that happens when you accidentally make eye contact with a stranger. But when I glanced back, he was still staring, unblinking. I exited the lot, figuring he just pulled in and wouldn't leave right away. As I drove off and approached a corner, I checked my rearview mirror, and there was the Hyundai pulling out and following me in the same direction. I tried to brush it off as a coincidence. Maybe he didn't like the crowded lot or had changed his mind about stopping. But to be safe, I decided to take a few odd turns on my way home. My town has 2 main parallel roads connected by smaller residential streets, so I wove a random path through them, making turns no one would mimic by chance. Right turn, check the mirror, he's there. Left turn. Look again, still there. My heart started to flutter as I realized this might not be random. I'm not a big guy, 5 feet 11 inches, 165 pounds soaking wet. I'm no pushover and would defend myself if it came to it, but I'd avoid a fight at all costs. Bravado's a dumb way to get hurt. After he followed me for far too long, I was fed up and decided to test him. I pulled into a gas station and parked at a pump with a clear path ahead, just in case I needed to peel out. If he followed me in, I know he was targeting me. If he drove past, maybe I was paranoid. No such luck. He pulled in right behind me, parking at the adjacent pump. His windows were tinted now, unlike at the lot, so I couldn't see inside. I grudgingly lowered my window, and he did the same, revealing an older man, maybe 50 or 55, with a sunken, weathered face that looked rough, like life had worn him down hard. I felt an instant primal unease, like my body was screaming to get away. "Can I help you with something?" I half shouted, my voice sharp with frustration. "Do you think I didn't notice you following me? What do you want?" His face flushed red with anger, but he didn't say a word. He just slammed his foot in the gas, tires screeching as he sped off. I was left more confused than before, and angrier too. What was his deal? I called the police to report the incident, and the dispatcher directed me to the parking authorities, who manage the lakefront lots. An officer asked if I'd meet him at the parking lot to give a statement. I agreed and drove straight back, feeling a mix of nerves and newfound confidence. If that guy showed up again, the cops would be there, so I wasn't worried. I pulled into the lot and parked in a spot with a clear view of the entrance so the officer could find me easily. While waiting, I flipped through my phone to pass the time. Then I glanced up, and there was the light blue Hyundai pulling into the lot again. I couldn't believe it. He did a slow circle around the lot and left, like he was scoping the place out. My pulse quickened, but I stayed calm, knowing the officer was on his way. A few minutes later, the cop arrived, and I gave him the full rundown of what happened. As I was finishing, the Hyundai pulled in again. "That's him," I blurted out, pointing at the car before I could stop myself. The officer gave me a surprised look, then flagged the car down and directed it to a parking spot, ordering the driver to turn off the engine. The officer spoke to the guy for about 10 minutes while I waited, my stomach in knots. When he came back, he told me the man claimed I was the one acting creepy, and he'd follow me to make sure I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it. The officer reassured me they knew of this guy, but didn't elaborate beyond saying he was shaking and asking to apologize. They escorted him home and told him he was banned from the park due to his past behavior in this incident. I felt like justice had been served, even if indirectly, and drove home relieved. That night, Julia and I were sitting on our third-story balcony around 2 a.m., smoking cigarettes and sipping beers. It was one of those rare moments where we could just relax, no chores or obligations weighing us down. My stress from being unemployed had faded to a dull hum in the back of my mind. We were laughing, enjoying the quiet of the night, when we noticed a car idling on the street 2 houses down from our building. It looked like a light blue Hyundai, maybe the same one. Though it was hard to tell in the dark, its shade could have been mistaken for white under the streetlights. I'd already told Julia everything about the day's events, so when I put a finger to my lips and nodded toward the car, she knew exactly what I was thinking. "I think that's the same car," I whispered. "I can't be sure, but it's the same make and model." I'd written down his license plate number in my phone earlier, so I squinted to make it out. The first 2 digits and the last matched, which was enough to convince me. I called the police again, explaining the whole situation to the dispatcher. As I was talking, the car slowly pulled away. The dispatcher said officers were nearby and would search the area, but they never found him. I triple-checked our locks that night, and nothing else happened. We tried to put it out of our minds. A few weeks later, Julia and I had mostly forgotten about the ordeal. One night, we got a late-night craving for snacks and Gatorade, so we drove to the corner gas station. I needed gas anyway. Julia stayed in the car while I went inside to grab the goodies. As I walked out, I looked over and saw that same ugly blue Hyundai pull up. The man was staring right at Julia in the driver's seat. My blood ran cold. I locked eyes with him, holding his gaze, wanting him to know I saw him. I hurried to the car, jumped in, and locked the doors, quickly explaining to Julia what was happening. We were both freaked out but tried to stay calm. We pulled out, driving randomly in case he followed, and called the cops again. They sent out patrols, but nothing came of it. We haven't seen him since. Later, we learned from the police that the park rangers knew this guy because he'd been caught following women around the park's trails, especially those with headphones walking or jogging alone, something Julia often did. Apparently, my run-in with him was the final straw, leading to his ban from the park. My theory is that he'd seen Julia driving my car around town, as she often did, and recognized her, associating her with me. That might explain why he followed me, hoping to catch her instead. It's just a guess, but it makes sense. The police said they'd keep us posted if anything came up and told us to call if we saw him again. So far we haven't, and I hope it stays that way. It's still hard for me to talk about what happened that Christmas. Honestly, I don't think I'd be sharing this if my cousin Jake hadn't called me last week, his voice trembling, shaken to his core. That call ripped open old wounds I thought had scarred over, or more accurately, unearthed memories I'd buried so deep I'd somehow convinced myself they never happened. It was December 23, 2011, and our entire family was gathered at my uncle's church in Greystone Village for our annual Christmas party. I was 13 at the time. My cousins Jake and Ethan were 14 and 12, respectively. The church hadn't been used for worship in years. My uncle had bought the property as an investment, using parts of it for community events while waiting for the right moment to renovate or sell. From the outside, it looked like any old stone church in small-town America. Gothic arches, weathered gray stone, a modest bell tower. But inside, that's where things got strange. The building had been modified so many times by different owners that it was a maze of mismatched architecture. Hallways twisted in odd directions, rooms seemed tacked on without purpose, and staircases sometimes led to dead ends. The original church structure, high ceilings, stained glass and all, had been awkwardly merged with newer additions, like office spaces and what looked like apartment units shoehorned into spaces they didn't belong. For context, Greystone Village is a quiet, rural town in the Midwest, the kind of place where old buildings like this often sit abandoned until someone with money and a vision comes along. My uncle was that someone, but even he didn't fully understand the building's layout. That night, while the adults sipped eggnog and chatted in the main hall, the former sanctuary, us kids were bored out of our skulls. The grown-ups were deep in their small talk, laughing about local gossip or reminiscing about Christmases past, and we were stuck watching them, restless. After about an hour, Jake leaned over, his eyes glinting with mischief. "My dad says there are parts of this place even he hasn't been in yet," he whispered to me and Ethan. "Want to check it out?" We didn't need much convincing. The idea of exploring a creepy old church was way more exciting than sitting through another round of Aunt Linda's fruitcake stories. The three of us slipped away while the adults were distracted, weaving through the crowd and out of the main hall. We started with the safe areas we knew. The former classrooms, now cluttered with boxes and old furniture, the pastor's office with its dusty bookshelves, and a small kitchen where the church used to host potlucks. But Jake had bigger plans. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring of keys he'd swiped from his dad's jacket. "These open pretty much everything," he said with a grin that promised trouble. "Let's see what's downstairs." The basement level was already unsettling, even with the dim fluorescent lights flickering above us. The floor was cold, unfinished concrete, and the walls were exposed brick and stone, with rusty pipes snaking along the ceiling. The air felt heavy, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. What made it weirder was how the space was laid out. Hallways bent at strange angles. Rooms were too small to serve any real purpose, and some doors opened to nothing but brick walls. It was like the architect had been drunk or just didn't care. "My dad says this place used to be connected to other buildings back in the 1800s, Jake explained as we wandered deeper. They just sealed off the connections instead of redesigning everything. For Americans unfamiliar with old rural churches, this kind of thing isn't uncommon in small towns. Buildings from the 19th century often get patched together over time, creating odd, disjointed spaces. We found ourselves in a narrow corridor that seemed to get tighter the further we went, like the walls were closing in. It opened into what looked like a small apartment, or at least what used to be one. There was a kitchenette with ancient, peeling cabinets, a cramped living area with stained carpet, and 2 doors leading to what I assumed were bedrooms or a bathroom. Who would live down here? I asked, my voice sounding flat, swallowed by the stale air. Probably the caretaker or something, Ethan said, running his finger through the thick dust on the countertop, leaving a clean streak behind. The first door led to a tiny bathroom, barely big enough for one person. The shower had rust stains so deep I couldn't tell if the tub was supposed to be white or beige. The second door was locked. Jake tried several keys from the ring, each one clanking uselessly, until one finally worked. I'll never forget the sound of that lock turning. Heavy metallic click that echoed in the dense air, far louder than it should have. The door creaked open, revealing a room about 10 feet square. It was completely empty. No furniture, no fixtures, nothing on the walls. Just bare concrete floors and yellowed plaster walls that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. Weird, Jake said, stepping inside. Why would they lock an empty room? I followed him in, and immediately a chill hit me, not the usual basement dampness, but a deep, bone-piercing cold that seemed to come from inside me. I rubbed my arms, trying to shake it off. Do you guys feel that? I asked, my breath visible in the air. Feel what? Ethan replied, but I noticed he was hugging himself, his shoulders hunched. Jake was already at the far wall, running his hands along the plaster. There's something off about this, he muttered. He pressed against one section, and to our shock, a portion of the wall shifted slightly, like it was on hinges. Holy crap, Ethan whispered. It's a hidden door. Jake pushed harder, and a 3-foot-wide section of the wall swung inward, revealing another small room behind it. This one was even emptier than the first, if that was possible. Just bare concrete on all sides, no windows, and a patch of water damage staining one wall. The air was colder here, heavier, with a faint smell like old paper mixed with something metallic, like rust or blood. This is so weird, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Why would someone hide an empty room behind another empty room? Jake stepped into the hidden space, and we followed, our sneakers scuffing against the concrete. Guys, he said suddenly, pointing to the right wall. There's another door there. Sure enough, there was a door set into the wall, but this one was different. It was heavy, industrial looking, with a small window at adult eye level, meaning we had to stretch to see through it. I can't see anything, Ethan complained, standing on his tiptoes, his nose pressed against the glass. Here, Jake said, dragging over an old metal folding chair from the corner of the first room. I hadn't even noticed it before, half hidden in the shadows. Jake went first. He climbed onto the chair, which wobbled under his weight, and peered through the window. He stayed there for what felt like a full minute, his body tense, not saying a word. When he climbed down, his face was pale, his eyes wide. What? I asked, my stomach twisting. What's in there? Jake just shook his head. Look for yourself, he said, his voice flat, almost hollow. I hesitated, but curiosity, and maybe a bit of stubborn pride, pushed me forward. I climbed onto the chair, the metal creaking under me, and pressed my face to the small, dirty window. At first, I couldn't see much. The room beyond was dark, with just enough ambient light filtering in from somewhere, maybe a crack in the wall to make out basic shapes. It was another empty room, slightly larger than the one we were in. But as my eyes adjusted, I saw something in the far corner. It was a person, or at least it looked like a person. They were nude, their skin pale and almost translucent, standing perfectly still, facing the corner. Their hands covered their face, and their back was to me, their spine and shoulder blades unnaturally prominent, like they hadn't eaten in months. My heart started pounding, so hard I could feel it in my throat. I knew I should get down, should tell the others we needed to leave, but I couldn't move. I just kept staring, waiting for the figure to turn around, to do something. It didn't. It just stood there motionless, like a mannequin or a statue. I don't know how long I would have stayed frozen there if Ethan hadn't gotten impatient. Come on, Thomas, let me see, he whined, tugging at my leg. I climbed down, my legs shaky, my mouth dry. There's someone in there, I whispered, barely able to get the words out. I know, Jake said, his eyes wide, his voice trembling. What do you mean, someone? Ethan demanded, already scrambling onto the chair. He was up there for maybe 10 seconds before he nearly fell off in his rush to get down. Its face, he gasped, backing away from the door, his eyes wild. I saw its face. What? Jake and I said at the same time, our voices overlapping. It turned around, Ethan said, his voice shaking so badly he could barely speak. Just for a second. Its face is all gray, and it has these huge, dark circles around its eyes. Like, so dark it looks like it doesn't have eyes at all. A cold sweat broke out across my body, my skin prickling. Did it see you? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ethan shook his head frantically. I don't think so. It just turned and then went back to facing the wall. But guys, we need to get out of here now. None of us argued. We stumbled out of the hidden room, pushed the fake wall back into place, locked the outer door, and practically ran back upstairs to the party. The warmth and noise of the main hall felt like a different world, but we didn't talk about what we'd seen. Not that night, not on the drive home, not during Christmas the next day or any day after. It was like an unspoken agreement to pretend it never happened. But that wasn't the end of it. My uncle hosted more events at the church over the next couple of years, and every time I felt drawn back to that basement. I never went alone, always made sure Jake or Ethan was with me, but we never went into that room again. We just walked past the locked door, and every time, I get this overwhelming feeling that something was on the other side, watching us through the solid wood. Jake felt it too. It knows we saw it, he whispered once as we hurried past, our footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. By the time I was 16, my uncle had sold a church, and our family events moved to other venues. Over time, the memory of that night didn't just fade. It was like my brain actively worked to erase it. I genuinely forgot about the whole incident until last week, when Jake called me out of the blue. We hadn't talked much in recent years, just the usual small talk at family gatherings, but his voice on the phone was urgent, strained. Thomas, do you remember that Christmas at my dad's church when we were kids? As soon as he said it, the memories flooded back with terrifying clarity. The hidden room, the figure in the corner, the bone-deep cold, the feeling of being watched. Jesus, I breathed, my hands trembling. I actually forgot about that. How did I forget about that? I did too, Jake said, his voice shaking. Until yesterday, when I saw this documentary about abandoned buildings, and they showed an old church. It wasn't the same one, but something about it just triggered everything. Thomas, what did we see that night? I don't know. I admitted, my stomach churning. But Ethan saw its face. There was a long silence on the line. I called Ethan first, Jake finally said. He doesn't remember any of it. Says we never even went exploring that night, but I know we did. And when I described what we found, he hung up on me. Won't answer my calls now. I felt sick. How do you forget something like that? And why was I remembering it now, after blocking it out for years? I don't know, Jake said, his voice barely above a whisper. But I keep thinking about that thing standing in the corner. Do you think it's still there in that room? The building's probably been renovated by now, I said, trying to sound rational, though I didn't believe it myself. That whole area is probably gone. Maybe, Jake said, but he didn't sound convinced. But what if it isn't? What if it's still standing there, waiting? What if it's been thinking about us all this time, just like we're thinking about it now? I didn't sleep at all that night. I keep seeing that figure in my mind, thin, pale, hands covering its face. I keep wondering what would have happened if it had turned around while I was watching. Would I have seen what Ethan saw, those dark, empty eye sockets and a gray face? Or would I have seen something worse? I've tried looking up the old church online to see what became of it. According to property records, it was converted into offices in 2016, but the basement level was condemned due to structural issues and sealed off. Sealed off, not demolished, not renovated, just closed up and left there. Which means that room is probably still there. And maybe, just maybe, so is whatever was inside it. Sometimes I wonder if forgetting was some kind of protection, like our minds couldn't handle what we saw and chose to lock it away. Now that the memories resurfaced, I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop picturing that figure slowly turning around, revealing a face with those deep, dark hollows where eyes should be. And I can't shake the feeling that, somehow by remembering it now, I've opened some kind of door. That it knows I'm thinking about it again. That it's thinking about me, too. Last year, my husband Max and I bought our dream house, a beautiful 2-story home perched right on the river. It needed work, but we got it for a steal because of that. The previous owners, an elderly couple, had lived there for decades before moving to a retirement community. The house had good bones, as they say, but it was stuck in the 1970s, with dark wood paneling on every wall and electrical wiring so outdated it was practically a fire hazard. For context, in the US, older homes like this often come with quirks, outdated aesthetics, and systems that need modernizing, especially in rural areas where properties can sit untouched for years. We spent 6 months renovating, tearing down walls, updating the electrical system, modernizing the kitchen, and replacing the bathrooms. It was exhausting, but rewarding. By the time we finished, the house felt like ours, transformed into a bright, open space that reflected our style. For the first couple of weeks after the renovations, everything was perfect. We'd sit on our back deck in the evenings, watching the river flow by as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden ripples across the water. I remember telling Max I couldn't believe our luck in finding this place. It felt like the kind of home you see in magazines, the kind you dream about but never think you'll actually own. The first strange thing happened about a month after we finished the renovations. I was home alone, working in our upstairs office around 2 p.m. Suddenly, I heard footsteps downstairs, heavy, deliberate steps, like someone wearing boots walking across our newly installed hardwood floors. I assumed Max had come home early from work, so I called out, "Max, you home?" No response. I went downstairs, expecting to find him in the kitchen or living room, but the house was empty. All the doors were locked. I checked our security system, a modern setup with sensors on every door and window, and it showed no activity since Max had left that morning. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just the house settling or maybe the pipes creaking. Old houses make weird noises, right? Especially ones built in the early 1900s, like ours, which had seen decades of wear before we moved in. But then it started happening more often. Footsteps when no one was home. Doors I knew I'd closed would be wide open when I came back. One morning, I came downstairs to find every single kitchen cabinet standing open, even though I distinctly remembered closing them before bed. Max didn't experience anything at first, which made me question my sanity. Was I being paranoid? Was I imagining things? I didn't want to sound crazy, so I kept it to myself for a while, hoping it would stop. Then, about 2 months ago, something happened that we couldn't ignore. We were both jolted awake in the middle of the night by 3 loud, deliberate knocks on our bedroom door. The sound was so forceful, it made the door rattle in its frame. Max jumped out of bed, his heart racing, and flung the door open, ready to confront whoever was there. The hallway was empty, dark, and silent. We stood there, staring into the blackness, our breaths shallow, waiting for any sign of movement. Nothing. We checked the entire house, turning on every light, but found no one. The security system showed no breaches. That night, we barely slept, lying awake, listening for any sound out of place. After that, we started talking more openly about the strange occurrences. Max admitted he'd been feeling uneasy too, like someone was watching him when he was alone in the house. He dismissed it as his imagination running wild, especially after I'd shared my experiences, but the knocking incident changed everything. We decided to dig into the history of the house and the property, hoping for answers. We checked county records and talked to a local historian, but nothing significant turned up. No tragic deaths, no violent crimes. The land had once been part of a larger farm in the early 1900s before being subdivided for residential development. Nothing that would explain what we were experiencing. About a month ago, we invited a priest from the local church to bless the house. Neither of us is particularly religious, but we figured it couldn't hurt. For Americans, this isn't an uncommon step. Home blessings are sometimes sought when people feel uneasy in their spaces, even if they're not devout. The priest was kind, didn't make us feel foolish, and performed a blessing in every room, sprinkling holy water and saying prayers. For a few days afterward, the house felt quieter, lighter. We started to relax, thinking maybe it had all been in our heads. Then last Tuesday happened. I was home alone, having taken the day off to catch up on some reading. It was a crisp fall day, sunny but cool, the kind of weather that makes you want to cozy up with a book. I was curled up in our bedroom with a novel and a cup of tea around 3 p.m. when I caught a glimpse of movement in the hallway outside, a shadow passing by the doorway. It was quick, almost too fast to register, but it was distinctly human-shaped. Max. I called out, thinking he might have come home early. No answer. I put my book down and went to check. The hallway was empty. I checked every room upstairs, nobody. I went downstairs, thinking maybe he'd come in quietly and hadn't heard me. His car wasn't in the driveway, and the house was completely empty. I checked our security app on my phone. No doors or windows had been opened. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a shadow from a tree outside, its branches swaying in the wind, or a bird flying past the window. I went back to my book, but I couldn't focus. I kept reading the same page over and over, my mind stuck on that fleeting shadow. After about half an hour, I gave up and decided to go downstairs to watch TV instead. I must have dozed off on the couch because the next thing I knew, I was dreaming. In the dream, I was walking through a forest I didn't recognize. It was nighttime, and I had a flashlight, but it kept flickering on and off. I was searching for something, or someone, my heart pounding with growing panic as the light failed. Suddenly, I heard a twig snap behind me. I spun around and saw a man standing there. His face was a black void, featureless, like a hole where his features should have been. He raised what looked like an old-fashioned rifle, the kind you might see in a museum, and pointed it at me. I tried to run, but my feet were glued to the ground. He fired, and I felt a searing pain in my chest. I woke up gasping, my heart racing, my shirt damp with sweat. The living room was dark. I must have slept longer than I thought. The sun had set, and I hadn't turned on any lights before dozing off. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized something felt wrong. The air was heavy, oppressive, like the calm before a thunderstorm when the pressure drops and the world feels too still. Then I heard it, the front door handle jiggling. Not like someone with a key trying to get in, but like someone testing the lock, seeing if it would give. Jiggle, pause, jiggle, pause. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Our security system would have chimed if the door had actually opened, but the jiggling continued for what felt like an eternity, probably only 30 seconds. Then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I sat there, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. My phone was on the coffee table in front of me, and I slowly reached for it, thinking I should call Max or maybe even 911. That's when I heard the hissing. It started low, barely audible, like air leaking from a tire. But it grew louder, more deliberate, until it sounded almost intentional, like a whisper I couldn't quite make out. It wasn't coming from the door anymore. It was coming from the hallway that led from the living room to the kitchen. I squinted into the darkness, trying to see if someone was there. And that's when I saw it, a shadow, but not a normal one. This was darker than the darkness around it, a void that seemed to absorb what little light there was in the room. It was shaped like a person, but the proportions were wrong. Arms too long, torso too narrow, head slightly too large. And it was moving toward me. The hissing grew louder as it approached, shifting in pitch and tone until it almost sounded like words in a language I couldn't understand, guttural and wrong. The shadow grew larger, filling more of the hallway, stretching up toward the ceiling. I was paralyzed, my brain screaming at me to run, but my body wouldn't move. I couldn't scream, couldn't even blink. The shadow was now just a few feet away, its elongated arms seeming to reach for me. The hissing now so loud it felt like it was inside my skull. In a surge of desperate panic, I managed to move my arm just enough to knock over a lamp on the end table beside the couch. It hit the floor with a thud but didn't break, and miraculously, it turned on. Light flooded the room, and the effect on the shadow was immediate and terrifying. It recoiled, like it had been struck, the hissing morphing into a high-pitched whine that made my ears ache. The shadow seemed to fracture, breaking apart like smoke caught in a strong wind, pieces of it fleeing from the light in all directions. Within seconds, it was gone. I sat there shaking, the lamp's small circle of light my only anchor. I don't know how long I stayed like that, minutes, maybe an hour. Eventually, I found the courage to move, turning on every light in the house room by room. I checked every closet, every corner, behind every door. There was nothing there. When Max got home around 6:30, he found me in the brightly lit living room, still trembling. I told him everything, the shadow, the hissing, the way it moved toward me. I expected him to be skeptical, to suggest I'd had a nightmare or a hallucination, but he believed me immediately. That's when he told me about his own experience the week before. He'd been in the basement doing laundry when he felt someone standing behind him. When he turned around, he saw what he described as a person made of darkness at the bottom of the stairs, just standing there, watching him. He dropped the laundry basket and bolted upstairs. By the time he worked up the nerve to go back down with a flashlight, it was gone. We spent that night in a hotel, too shaken to stay in the house. The next day, we called the priest again, along with a local paranormal investigator someone had recommended. The investigator spent hours in our house with various devices, EMF meters, thermal cameras, audio recorders. He said he detected unusual electromagnetic fluctuations in several areas, particularly in the hallway where I'd seen the shadow, and in the basement where Max had his encounter. He couldn't say definitively what was in our house, but he said it wasn't typical of a standard haunting, whatever that meant. The priest performed another, more intensive blessing, this time with a graver expression. He tried to reassure us that whatever was here couldn't harm us physically, but I could see the concern in his eyes. We've been back in the house for about a week now. We've installed more lights, motion sensors, and cameras in every room, hoping to catch something, or at least deter it. Nothing significant has happened since that night, but the house doesn't feel right anymore. I feel watched constantly, like eyes are on me even when I'm alone. Sometimes I catch glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision, gone when I turn to look. Sometimes I hear that faint hissing when I'm in a room by myself, so quiet I'm not sure if it's real or my imagination. Max wants to sell the house and move, but the housing market is tough right now, and we poured everything we had into the renovations. We're essentially stuck here for the foreseeable future. I don't know what that thing was. I don't know if it's still here, hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to return. I don't know if the blessings and precautions we've taken have worked, or if they've just made it more cautious, biding its time. All I know is that I sleep with the lights on now. I avoid being alone in the house whenever possible. I can't look at the shadows in our hallway without remembering how one of them moved toward me with purpose, its two long limbs reaching, its hissing filling my ears with an almost language I could nearly understand. I used to be a skeptic, rolling my eyes at ghost stories, dismissing them as overactive imaginations. Now I lie awake at night, watching the shadows on our bedroom walls, wondering if one of them will detach itself and glide toward our bed, wondering what happens if the lights go out, wondering if, next time, a simple lamp won't be enough to make it retreat.